Hello, everyone. My name is Maxine Choy. Welcome to the Healthy Entrepreneur Show, a podcast that's brought to you by Business Takeout. Business Takeout is a social enterprise that recognizes Black wealth through business education. And as usual, we are here to just have conversations about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, and at the same time, taking time out to make sure that we take care of our health, our wealth, and our well-being. I'm just going to get right to it and introduce my guest. His name is James Gregg. Hi, James. Welcome.
Hi, Maxine.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You're looking like you're bracing yourself for the conversation we're going to have, right?
Yeah,
Are you bracing yourself? Okay.
I'm bracing myself.
Don't worry. We're going to have a very supportive conversation, a very interesting one, of course. We're talking about being an entrepreneur and basically like what it's like to be married to an entrepreneur and being able to have the relationship, sustain itself, right? Because we know that sometimes this could be a huge struggle for many people who are married to entrepreneurs. So I'm going to introduce everyone to you. Your name is James Gregg, and you own a restaurant called Carib 21.
Yeah, correct.
Right. Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I came to Canada 10 years ago, and because of the lack of opportunities, for people migrating from the Caribbean to pursue the career that they choose to pursue, I was having a lot of challenges in that sense. So, I decided to just branch off and do my own thing.
Nice. And that's why you decided to open up the
Open
restaurant.
restaurant, yeah.
Nice. Okay, and the restaurant is Caribbean foods, right?
Urban food. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you've been an entrepreneur for how long now?
It's 4 years.
4 years? Okay.
4 years, yeah.
And I'm going to ask the question. How long have you been married?
10 years.
10 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as we know, when you become an entrepreneur, it changes the financial dynamics of the family, right?
Yes.
And finances become a contention in the household. And most often, if there's trouble in there, or in the first stages you're struggling, sometimes we want to keep that away from our partners, right? So, how do you feel? Do you think it's right for you to keep that away from your partner and just deal with it, or do you think you should come out in the open and just say, "Here, look, honey, we're struggling. Um, this is what's happening." How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, once you're married and you're going into business, I believe that it should be like a partnership. And if you're not doing it together, if you're doing in your businesses like separately, then it could become a contentious issue like in the marriage.
But
So I
what if you
believe,
don't? But what if your partner? This is your business. Your partner's doing something else. So you're saying, like, I agree with you when you're saying you should do it together, but maybe this is not a business for you to do it together with your partner.
no, in the sense, not that you're working together like a partnership, but in terms of the concept of the business. So, like for example,
Yes.
like when the the idea came up, well, she was the one that said, you should, from a conversation that we're having with some other people, and she was the one that started encouraging me and said, you should do it now. So,
Right.
I believe, when you start in terms of you discuss it as a couple.
Yes.
And because sometimes people can be married, but they're like try to keep their individual identity to an extent where it can be like a problem. So I believe like if you discuss, because once you're married, like your success is not only for you, right? And
Right.
your failure is not only for you. So, for something like a business, like it's very, especially like restaurant business. Restaurant business is considered like the highest risk business out there. So that's one of the reason why for restaurants are not eligible for loans from banks or any private institution. So most restaurants are funded by investors or people just doing it on their own. So when you're doing a business that as high risk as that, your partner have to be in it with you, because if you go down, she goes down, and if you succeed, she should succeed also.
Right. So, I mean, okay, so when you say do things together, you mean just have the person involved in every step of the way so that
Yeah,
they know what's happening. And I totally understand that. I actually wrote down some of the key issues in when you have an entrepreneur and the person is not, right? Because oftentimes they may not understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur and how much hours it takes just
yeah,
to work in the business and on the business, right? And most often you're dealing with the lack of resources or
yes,
finances, right? So it can be very hard for the person to understand, especially when there's family involved, right?
yeah,
um, and money becomes an issue like very very fast. Like that's like the first thing, right? So
yes, yeah, right.
um, you know, like what are your opinions about this? Like, should you reveal the financial information to your partner every step
Well,
of
I
the
think
way?
I believe that in the whole inception of the business, like everything should be on the table. So, like for example, like as I said, restaurants, we do not get loans from bank and stuff like that. So in our case, like coming up with the money was taking out a second mortgage on the house.
Right,
So, as a husband, you can't do that alone by your own. You have to sit down and you have to,
right. So
talk
you're
to your
talking
partner.
about so that's the initial conception of the business.
Yeah,
But
so I
as you
think,
go,
I said from day one, like it should be discussed and it should continue.
yes, it should
Like
continue.
you
Yeah,
should continue discussing it.
right. Yeah, you're right. I think that what I was thinking more so on the along the lines of like you may not reveal that the business is struggling like as it's going. You may just kind of withhold some of the struggles from your partner because then they would have a tendency to get a little bit nervous and a little bit unsure about what you're doing, the venture and whatnot. And I'm not trying to advocate that this is something that we should keep secret. It's just
Yeah,
more so the perils, like what you go through as an entrepreneur, especially when you've taken the whole livelihood of the family or your livelihood and you put it all into one place, and things become a little bit risky, right?
yeah,
I spoke to some people about this, and most women and men say that they want to know. They want to know every single detail, and I guess it's fair enough, right?
yeah,
Um, and then oftentimes the person might feel that they're being left alone a lot, right? That's a common thing as well, where the partner feels left alone because you're spending hours and hours working on this business, right?
yeah.
Have you ever found that in your own relationship?
Yes, yes. But well, as I said, everything starts from the inception of the
Mm-hmm.
business, planning stage, and because what I did, I had a business plan. So I gave myself a year to put together a business plan, and she was involved with it every step of the way. And so all the discussion that needed to be had, the important discussion, such as the average business do not see profit for the first 3 years. So
Right.
that's going to be a sacrifice, because
Absolutely.
no matter how great you look out there and see like a restaurant business looking fancy and everything,
Right.
and just a brick and mortar business in general, like
Right.
normally profit comes after 3 years. So
So,
once your partner, is all the information is on the table,
right.
then you can prepare each other for the journey.
So, what has been your biggest struggle? Any like,
COVID, COVID,
oh, in on being an
COVID.
entrepreneur? Okay,
Yeah, COVID, yeah.
that's fair enough.
Because as I said, the 3 years is when the business takes off. So 2019, I was saying to my wife, because we already struggled, throughout, and it's a trial and error, because sometimes when you try to go into business, you do your research and you try to get as much information as possible. But there's some things that you just have to learn while you're in it, in the midst of it. So to go through that process to learn and everything. And then, 2019, I said to her that, 2020 is the year because everything was coming together.
And
So
then COVID hit.
restaurants are base. You make 90% of your profit during the summer season
Right.
in any restaurant. So, we're preparing for summer 2020 and then COVID hits and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've had some tough challenges. But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
how did you find that shift pivot? Like how did that affect the family dynamics, and what did you do to remedy it or to help her feel more secure about the business?
Well, it affected it, but what COVID brought, we had to deal with, in the first 3 years. So, there are days when you feel like giving up. So, like, as I said, like, I'm very open with her about the business and stuff like that. So, if I get home and I feel, down, like, the business is not going to make it, and, that she'll give that sense of encouragement, to encourage you. So, that's why it's very important, like, the person that you're with, because when you look at most people in business,
Yes.
like the success is not like like an individual success. Like for the partner is always somewhere in the wing, like in that success. So
Absolutely. The partner is always in the behind the scenes,
yeah,
providing all the moral support and encouragement. Yeah, for sure. You know, so oftentimes when somebody goes into entrepreneurship, it leads them to another place. It leads them to open to meeting people, going off, maybe even traveling, and perhaps getting into new things and elevating the business to another level, right? So, with that, have you ever found that an opportunity like this is something that would have affected your marriage or anything like that, or would you have taken that opportunity?
uh, no, not really. I think the only thing that can affect your marriage is what you allow to affect it, because
Mm,
like being in business is not different from doing a 9 to 5. You're still exposed to people. Like I work in hospitality, so like I've always been exposed to a lot more people, like from all over the globe. So yeah, it only affects it if you allow it in.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was reading some never says. I'm just gonna
Okay.
have some fun here. So there's a few things that you never say to an entrepreneur, and this is your spouse, right? So I mean, your
Mhm.
friends can tell you these things, your friends can say anything they want, but when your spouse says it, it's a whole different feeling, a whole different um, ball game. So number one is, and I'm gonna replace it with never say this, but instead say that, right? So
Okay.
the
Okay.
thing is, the one is, why are you working so much? So never say that. You say, hey, love, when will you be able to take your next break? Because I'd love to help you relax.
That one is good.
And that's a good one. So anybody
That's a good
watching
one.
here, if you if you have a spouse or a partner who is working hard, here's some advice. You say those things. Hey Donna, I agree with James. You agree with James? What do you agree with James? Is it about the traveling around, like being exposed? And I totally agree with you. I think that if you've been used to it being
Yeah.
exposed, so that the fact that you're an entrepreneur now, any kind of exposure going forward, it's not going to affect it. It's because you've been through it all already, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm getting from it. I think it's because oftentimes when people, like when you're an entrepreneur, depending on what you do, you could be a public speaker, you could be a plumber, you could be whatever, and sometimes it causes contention in marriages because the person is always out and being exposed to different people and temptations that causes a contention with the family, right? Because
Yeah.
they're losing family time, right? And couple time, and they're around other things, right? But anyway, we won't talk. Donna says, words play a very important factor in a relationship. Absolutely, words play a very important factor. I agree with it. Thanks, Donna. Here's never say. Um, in this economy, aren't customers hard to find? You never say that to your partner. What you say is there any way I can support you in bringing in more clients or customers, honey? So yeah, like it's sort of like, you know, you have somebody who may be a little bit pessimistic about what you're doing, and it can be very difficult, you know, to accept it and to see the vision that you have for this company, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So, you know, what advice would you give a man who is an entrepreneur and has a wife who may not, let's say, may not be 100% um, confident in what he is doing, or even vice versa, man and woman? What advice would you give?
Well, I believe well, that one is very tricky because sometimes if you don't believe in your partner, what your partner is doing, you're not going to support it, right? And
Yeah,
you're not going to be there to encourage them because you could say I told you so, like, instead of like encouraging words. So I think, as I said, from the inception, it's very important. Like, it's the foundation, right? You can't build a house without a foundation. So I think, even like if you're in a relationship and you're thinking of going into business and your partner is not on board with it, I think I would say probably step back a little bit and discuss it. And even if your partner is not 100%, but once you get your partner up to 85%, or to be confident that you have the capability to do what you said you're going to do, and you're not going to, because the thing is that your partner might not is not going to think that you're letting yourself down, but you're letting them down as a family, right?
right,
Because
right.
everything is at risk.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. It's so important though, because this is a very tricky one, and I think for the most part is when you have a partner who may not believe in being an entrepreneur. Do you
Yeah.
think do you think that marriages fail sometimes because the person is an entrepreneur?
Well, it does. Like, I've known of cases where one spouse will go into business, and as I said, like, especially in North America, like, the quickest way to get money is to a second mortgage. So there are a lot of people who choose to go into business and would lose the house because of the business. So that's why I said, step back, because you can't be if you're married, you can't be selfish, because you know um, especially in the restaurant business, I think it's 75% of restaurants fail within the first 3 years. So if you're going into a high risk business and your partner has concern about it, then I believe that being married, and the best thing to do would be to step back and just to talk about it until you get to a point where your partner can agree to a certain level.
Yeah, I agree with that. Here's another never say. Um, why are you stressed out all the time? Why can't you relax? um, so of course, instead you say, "I would love to help you relax. Would you prefer I rub your face, your shoulders, your legs, or your feet?"
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what do you,
I think the biggest misconception of, like, entrepreneurs is that it's like people on the outside looking in, and it looks um, luxurious or exotic. It looks cool,
it's not. Yeah.
but for I heard a entrepreneur said once that don't waste time sleeping right now. You'll have enough time to sleep when you're dead,
Ooh,
because that's the amount of time that you put when you're trying,
yes.
especially when you're trying to build something.
Yes.
And I think that's why I said, like, the communication is the key, because the most important thing, especially when you're trying to relate to your partner, is to say, yes, I know that for the first 5 years or so, there's going to be a lot of stress. But you have to bring to your partner the end result that, in 10 years, we could be in Bora Bora, we could be in Tahiti, once you get it to a level of success, then, we could do all these stuff that you can't do working a regular 9 to 5.
Right. No,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. So for you, in terms of family, hi Trisha, thanks for joining. In terms of family, like how do you juggle your family life and your business? How do you do
Well,
that?
luckily um, close to, we live close to the restaurant.
Yes.
So like, um, I would just, when I'm closing, like I'll just close the door and I'll run, go home and spend time, especially with the kids, because the kids are very important in this equation too. Because sometimes, like for an adult, like for my wife, like she would have the maturity enough to deal with certain things, and
Hmm.
like sometimes your spouse is busy doing their thing too. So, but all the time missing with the kids, that is the most critical part. So, you have to, I'm able to juggle a bit and just to kind of keep in the back of my head that, once the business is successful,
Right.
I can spend as much time as possible. But you
Right.
have to
Right.
find ways to do it.
Absolutely. It's very important to find the ways to juggle with the kids. I remember when I started my entrepreneur life when my daughter was 5 years old. And I remember those days where I would struggle with, um, thank you so much, Eco Body, Eco Friendly. Thank you. Um, I would struggle with managing the time, but I would make the sacrifice because I knew how important it was for me to show up for her.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah, it's very difficult, but that was number one for me. Is no matter what, I would show up. I sometimes would take her into the business
yeah,
if I couldn't, be there for her the way that in the capacity that I want to be there. So it is a huge struggle, and oftentimes it's the one that one parent is left at home to look after the kids
yeah,
while you're out, trying to get the business up and running. So I can see where this can cause some kind of contention in the marriage because of that. And entrepreneurship is not easy. It's not for
not
everyone,
easy. Yeah,
right? And it can actually either make a marriage flourish or it can cause problems in the marriage, right? And especially if one does not fully 100% believe in it,
yeah,
like you have to believe in it because there are some people who are just believe in working 9 to 5, getting the paycheck and getting some secured income, and that's what makes them feel like they have some kind of accomplishment in life. Whereas others, we feel that we need to be able to manage our own time and money and be able to have that extra income or make with the potential to make a large income and do it on your own. So it's a
yeah.
struggle. I'm going to share another one. Can't you live? So here's a never say. Can't you live without your phone for an hour? That's a funny one, right? Um, so instead and this is a good one. I understand, dear, that your work requires you to be available via the phone, and I really appreciate it when you make an effort to keep your phone use to a minimum as we are spending private time together. I mean, that's huge because
Yeah,
there's some people who are able to just like put the phone away when they go home. That's it, no more business, and just dedicate their time to the family and whatnot. But there's some businesses where you can't do that, right? And you
yeah,
need to have your phone, like ready for you, right? So I think that's interesting that that can cause a problem as well, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever had that problem at all or anything like that?
No, not really, because for with the business that I'm in, it's like it's not much
Doesn't
technology. Like we just started. Well, my wife was doing the Instagram and stuff like that. So, she's the one that's always on the phone. So, Yeah, no, it hasn't been a problem in this case.
Nice, nice.
No.
Okay, so that's good then, because there are some people
Yeah, there's
who
some
always
businesses
have to,
that your phone keep ringing off 24/7. So
yeah, and
yeah,
just messages to check, orders that are coming in, inquiries. It happens all the time, right? So I totally understand.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's good to put because when you're an entrepreneur, like the constant, especially when you're building, there's a constant stress that you go through. Because the bills have to be met. Everything have to go perfect, and you're because when you're building, that's when you try to be perfect, right? Nothing can't go wrong when you're trying to build. When you're trying to get to that level of profitability. So, to get home and to have like notification going off in your head, when you get home, you want to just it's like an escape. You just want to close
yes,
your eyes and just,
yeah,
not
I
worry
know,
about anything.
I know what you mean. I know. Um, so there's one last never say never is, don't most businesses fail within the first 5 years, honey?
Yeah,
uh,
that's the worst one, right?
that's the worst one you can
That's the
say to
worst
your
one.
partner, especially when they're just trying, right? I think we already know that. I think it comes with we everybody knows that, right? Some of them fail, right? Most fail. Um, so what you say instead is, I believe in you, and I know you can accomplish anything you put your mind to. And how can I support you right now? And that's huge, right?
Yeah,
Because you need that, right? You need that. You know, I wanted to talk about this because, I've known a lot. I've encountered a lot of people who have had these issues in their relationships where they become an entrepreneur and then the partner doesn't support it, or things go wrong and the partner's like, I told you so. Um,
yeah,
and there's like even just the burnout and the stress and the overwhelm of trying to run the business, and and you have somebody who's not fully on board, or even you yourself may have like a breakdown or a setback or certain insecurities about the business, and you have to show up for your partner and be either romantic or happy or whatever the
yeah,
case may be, and it can really have a toll on your mental state, right? So I wanted to just talk to man man about this, because oftentimes um, it's the women who has to hold down the fort at home,
yeah,
right? And making sure that everything's smooth, like the house is clean, the dinner is cooked, and the kids are taken care of. Like it is what it is, right? So I just think it's interesting how when you say that you should share everything and talk about everything and have everything in the open. And I think that's the lesson that we learn from here, is that being transparent with the
yeah.
business and the
Very important.
finances, and I think
Yeah,
also your emotions. That's very
yeah,
important as well, right? Letting the person know how you feel and how it's affecting you, and celebrating the wins and
yeah,
the losses, so that you ride together, ride the wave together. And I think that with that you can really keep the marriage together, because you're in this together, obviously, right?
yeah,
So this is
yeah. Because
go ahead.
it's different. It's a bit different in there are different cases because there are cases where like you get married, but you started the business before the relationship got serious.
Hmm.
So your partner doesn't feel a part of it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
sometimes I feel that sometimes that's why I believe that, starting together, is
Hmm.
the most important thing because sometimes when you start alone, um, then you get into your own mind and people are thinking like, okay, you weren't here from day one, so we're gonna have to do a prenup or there are different scenarios. So and your partner might not share the same, and then there's sometimes can be like as I said, there a big misconception with business, like you could be dating someone and that person is an entrepreneur, and you're on the outside looking in, like during the courtship, and like if you're talking to your girlfriends and you're saying, oh, my boo owns this or owns that, but you don't know the details of the day to day. And then when you get fully in the relationship, now when you're married, then you realize it's not as
It's not, yeah,
it's not
lucrative.
what I thought it was.
Yeah,
On the outside looking in, like I didn't think that he comes home like nights miserable or depressed, or
yeah.
so it depends on how it starts. And that's why I said, like, for me, I believe that what worked because we started together, right? We, like, even before the concept started, we from the business plan, we discussed the pros and the cons, of doing the business.
That's interesting that you talked about when you meet somebody and during the courtship, one is an entrepreneur, one is not. There is also that concern about, like, how are we going to sustain our relationship if
Yeah,
I don't know if I don't know how secure this entrepreneurship is or the business is going. I don't know how we're going to manage when the real life happens, right? So
yeah.
that's another concern as well. I have one last question before we go because we're wrapping up. You said something about prenup. Do you think that if you're running a business and it's a successful business and you meet somebody and you're already in that business, do you think a prenup should be done? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's the best thing. Like,
Hmm.
I think if you're not, and I've seen it like every day, like especially in our community, like black women are doing way better than men.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have your apartment, you have your car, you have everything going for you. And like sometimes, especially when you get to a certain age, like your 30s, your 40s, and you build your life, I believe then it's important to do a prenup because you don't want someone to come in with a bag and then leave with a bag of money, right? So, but when you're building together, then it's easier. Then there's no prenup, right? When
Yeah, you know what?
yeah,
You might be right there, especially
yeah,
if it's
yeah,
a. I think people are afraid to bring up a prenup because it may look like you're being selfish. But I've seen situations where they say I should have, right?
yeah, because
Yeah, so
prenup is different now. Like
yeah,
when you spoke about prenup 20 years ago, it's about guys protecting their money. But as I said, in our community now, there are more women that are having success, right? So prenup goes, both way now. And like people will be charming. They'll be charming, and then they'll come and leave with everything. So yeah.
yeah. Trisha Wallace says I agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
if
mean
you're
it,
not
it
building
can.
together, then
Yeah, it can
I
protect
would say
your
prenup.
business to some degree, right? Because you
Yeah.
can you can make it any way you want, right? Okay. If we have anybody watching here who does prenups, put a comment below. Okay, James. This has been interesting and enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Your information is below for anyone to reach you.
Yeah.
Um, so you are the co-founder. No, you're the owner, founder of Carib 21, and from what I hear, it's a great restaurant, delicious food,
Yeah.
and one day I'll come and visit you
Yeah. After COVID, yeah.
after COVID. So you're still open, but you're
Well,
not you're
mostly
doing
online and
online.
takeout.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, James, thank you so much for talking with me. I do appreciate it. And all the guests, all the viewers who've been watching, I do appreciate you as well. Thank you so much for watching. And we look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, stay well and be well. Have yourself a good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.